Good, good.
Here. Hey, good afternoon, Christine Edwards. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I am Sharon Porter. I'm the head of public relations for Enlivian, and this is our LIV TV Lunch and Learn series. And today, our guest is Christine Edwards, who is the founder of Amplify Charlotte. And what you guys are doing is just letting people know. Tongue-tied, I'm sorry. Letting people know that their voices can be heard and that you're building communities and bridging communities together, right?
Absolutely. That's what we're doing, specifically to highlight how to get engaged and how to get involved during the election season right now.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot going on, right? We're seeing some things that we've never seen before in the history of politics of this country. And many of us feel just very overwhelmed. I mean, we have politics, we have social activism, we have Corona, right? Which is a health policy, is a health policy issue. And people are frustrated. They want to do something, but they don't know how to get involved. Like, how do you encourage people and where do you tell them that they can go or they should go to get involved?
Sure. So, voter engagement in 2020 looks a lot different. It looks a lot different than it did in 2016 and even in 2018. And the reason it looks different is for a number of reasons. Number one is because of COVID-19 and because of this major health crisis that our country is going through right now. So voter engagement looks different. It's all digital, to be quite honest. It's all virtual. And so I'm sure you're getting the text messages. I'm sure you're getting the
non-stop getting text messages. Like, where did
emails,
number? Yeah.
Phone calls.
Yes.
And so you have to remember that, everyone is truly working in a digital world, not just, you and I are working digital, but that includes campaign workers.
Right.
They're not going and knocking on doors like they traditionally would. And so that engagement has gone to your cell phone. It's gone to where you are in the spaces that we currently occupy, which is digital spaces. So that's one way that voter engagement looks different for 2020. Another way that voter engagement is different is because of this sort of really tense political climate because of our current administration. And so there's just a lot of division between, the major party systems. And so because of that, there's some fear. There's some fear involved when it comes to voting and just making sure that your vote is going to be safe and secure and making sure that your vote is counted. Have you experienced that? A little bit of uncertainty?
I had not. I let me say this. I am concerned about uncertainty this time around, for sure.
Absolutely.
I'm concerned in prior years about not being able to vote. I've always voted in person, so I've never felt unsafe. Obviously, like you mentioned, I'm considering and I'm going to early vote, right? And I know early vote begins October 15th, and I'm going to early vote just because I don't want to necessarily risk anything. Quite frankly, it feels to be a bit more of a safer option. But let's just go back to, but how can people get involved? I mean, that's voting, but how can people get involved? Other ways.
Yes, absolutely. So that is really the third way to get involved is to get informed and get educated about who is on the ballot and what races are on the ballot. Now, we're still talking about voting, but we're talking about being informed voters, and we're talking about voting all the way up and down the ballot. And so that means not just the presidential races and not just not even just the state level races. You want to make sure that you look at the different local level races that are on the ballot as well. And so my company, Amplify Charlotte, what we've been doing is just sharing online the different aspects of voter engagement that I just mentioned around how to vote, when to vote, who to vote for, what's on the ballot. We've been sharing all of that on our social media platforms. In addition to that, we've also been sharing information about virtual public meetings. right? So those local level public meetings that are hosted by our city council, for example, and the Mecklenburg County Commission. And so those are other ways also to get involved.
I want to say I'm still fairly new to Charlotte, and I just started attending some of the county commissioner meetings virtually online. And I did gain a different perspective because I didn't realize how ultimately accessible the people are who are really going to have a direct impact in my community, like ground level. And being virtual is a whole lot better than, oh, I've got to get over to this, government center building by such and such time. So what do you think the impacts of, I guess, COVID has had on us in this environment?
My hope is that people are getting more involved. That's my hope. My hope is that because they're more accessible online, people are tuning in, right? And they're going down and downloading the agendas and seeing what issues are on the agendas. I'm really hoping that, in this virtual environment, people can sort of be a fly on the wall, in these meetings more so than how they would in the past when they had to, actually get there in person. I will say, though, we do still have in our community, we do still have quite a large digital divide. So there's still people out there who, don't necessarily have broadband at home or don't have, that level of access to broadband, or, they might have other challenges in their home that prevent them from tuning in. However, there are still ways to call into the meetings. And there are ways to, get together in online communities in order to share what's going on. Particularly the faith community is a great way to do that as well. And so we've been we've been putting all of the agendas in our Facebook group, the Amplify CLT on Facebook, and on our Instagram page. We have been sharing all of the weekly public meetings. There is a city council meeting actually tonight, I believe at 5 p.m. And so we just are encouraging people to get involved at that level. The other thing I will say, though, is just a really quick thing about, how Mecklenburg County and the city of Charlotte is structured. So we are a council manager form of government. And, there's a lot of folks
new for me. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That move from strong mayor communities, and a strong mayor community is really where the mayor has a part in the day-to-day operation of the city, whereas in Charlotte, the council manager form means that there is a nonpartisan, there's a hired city manager that manages the day-to-day operation of the city, somewhat like a business. And so it's really important that you follow along to the budget discussions so that you know how your taxpayer dollars are being allocated. So there's the city level, but then there's also the county level. And of course, you have 1 million people in Mecklenburg County. There's 1 million people here, I think 1.1. And, Charlotte is just one city within Mecklenburg County. There are 6 towns, within Mecklenburg County as well. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved. While I'm on the subject, the last thing I'll say there is, in even number years, that is when Mecklenburg County commissioners are on the ballot. That is when their races are on the ballot. That's when they are up for re-election. And then in odd number years, that is when the city council is up for re-election. So you'll see your city council person, on the ballot in 2021.
Right. So we're getting questions. Toya says, good morning. And let me just say that if there's anyone watching and you'd like to just type into the chat, we'll be happy to answer your questions. Toya asks, what do you think the pros and cons of a mail-in ballot are?
That's a good question. Thank you for asking that, Toya. So it's funny you asked that because I just got my ballot in the mail here. And I traditionally vote in person. I still plan to vote in person too. But there are some benefits to using a mail-in ballot, and those include you can actually look at who is on the ballot prior to getting into the ballot booth. You can take your time to look at the different names. so you can get familiar with the names and have a chance to research who they are. That's one awesome thing about the mail-in ballot system. The second thing is you don't necessarily have to wait in these long lines. And we don't know in Mecklenburg County that there are going to be long lines, but we do know that people are registered in North Carolina at rates that are higher than what we've seen before. So we can anticipate there might be some long lines. However, in early voting, there's going to be 33 voting sites. So there's going to be plenty of space, we hope, for people to vote. Okay. That's the second thing, is you don't necessarily have to wait in a long line. And the third thing about mail-in ballot is, again, in terms of going in person, you don't necessarily have to worry about getting childcare, thinking about what other, commitments that you have, and, things of that nature. So really not having to really kind of move your schedule around, being able to sit down and study who's on the ballot. Now, there are some challenges with mail-in ballots because, again, we go back to that fear. We go back to that uncertainty. Because the U.S. Post Office is responsible, for collecting these and just making sure that they get to the Board of Elections on time, there's a little bit of fear around that. And we also, only because the only reason that there's fear around it is because it's been stoked from our current administration. Our local Board of Elections and our state Board of Elections are actually very confident in being able to handle the influx of ballots. They're very confident in that. And they've stated that.
Though. There are also locations you can go to, early voting locations, right?
That's correct. You can take your ballot into an early voting location, and you can drop it off. However, you want to make sure that that it's accepted. So there's no drop boxes in Mecklenburg County. Okay. I just want to say that there's no drop boxes. In order to turn your mail-in ballot in person, if you want to bring it in person, you actually have to talk to someone and confirm that it's been received. Okay. And then there's also a website that you can go and track to make sure that it's been accepted and received. But there's no drop boxes in Mecklenburg County. So I just want to let y'all know, if you see a mysterious drop box pop up, that's not legitimate. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing is, with your mail-in ballot, there are a number of signatures that you want to make sure you sign on the envelope, right? So the voter needs to sign it and a witness needs to sign it. We have heard from the State Board of Elections that African Americans are getting their ballots rejected at higher rates because they're not being filled out correctly. Okay.
Wow.
And so you really want to just be mindful of that.
Okay. So Toya has another question, and that's really good information. I didn't know that. Toya asks, how long does it take to receive the ballot in the mail?
I guess mine took about a week and a half. So I requested my ballot and it just came at the end of last week. So about a week and a half. And I think you have until October 27th in order to get it postmarked in the mail. But again, I personally would not necessarily do that because there's no guarantee. Okay. So you can have your ballot postmarked. Oh, actually, it says on here, deadline for ballots postmarked by November 3rd. Okay, so they can be postmarked by election day on November 3rd. Okay, and then it says November 3rd, election day, deadline to return your ballot in person to the County Board of Elections office by 5 p.m. And then November 6th, they can be in the mail, but they must be postmarked by the 3rd.
Right. Okay. So just so that I'm clear then, because so I could also request the ballot and I could drop it off at an early voting location. And I saw on North Carolina's Board of Elections, there's a number of different places. You can check Mecklenburg County and it'll tell you all the places where you can go to in Mecklenburg County where you can do it, but you can't necessarily fill out a ballot there. Do you understand that to be the case?
That is the case. That is the case because your ballot is going to have your unique identifier on it.
Got it.
In the mail, you must request it via mail, or you must request it in person, but not at a early voting location. Early voting locations are for people to return their ballots or to cast their vote.
Got it. And
you can also do same day registration.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. All right, so switching up a little bit, there's been a lot of energy in these last couple of years with the social activism that's going on, Black Lives Matter. I mean, we're not only supporters, obviously, of Black Lives Matter, but we're also source of income discrimination. There's so much going on. What's the energy that you feel around people and voting? Do you think people are going to come out? Do you have concerns that maybe people aren't going to come out, right? It's hard. For me, I think it's kind of hard to tell.
I think that that's a valid concern, because like you said, there has been a lot of energy, a lot of positive energy around just highlighting Black Lives Matter and highlighting the importance of Black rights and civil rights in general. A lot of really positive energy around that. But at the same time, there's been a lot of sort of negative energy that causes that fear. And so there are organizations like, for example, Common Cause NC, and they have been working with people to get to train poll monitors. And so poll monitors, let me make sure I get the number right. Their poll monitors are going to be responsible for just ensuring that people feel safe at these polling sites. I think they're going to be official. So you actually have to register and complete training, and they're going to be wearing all the same color, I think a yellow t-shirt, so that you'll know that this is a poll monitor. And so they're going to be, I'm not going to say that they are trying to combat voter intimidation, but that is one of the things that that's one of the things that they are going to help with. Now, there's also a number that you can call. It's an election protection number, where if you do feel that you are being intimidated and you want to report that polling site, there's a number 866-OUR-VOTE.
Okay.
And that is the number that you would call.
So here's the question, though. If you're being intimidated on election day, how does that work? Isn't it too late at that point?
You know, I've never experienced that. So that's a whole new world. You know, I don't know. I think that what we've seen, for example, what we've seen in Georgia, what we've seen in Kentucky, I know that there are some rural counties in Georgia that are largely Black counties that only had that one polling location, and they were standing in line for hours and hours and hours, and then 6 o'clock rolled around and they closed the doors. And so they ended up having to get a judge to come and force them to open it back up. And so what I would say in that case is just to stand in line. Do not get out of line. Make sure you are standing in line, and don't lose your place in order to go ahead and cast your vote. Something similar happened in Kentucky, in Jefferson County, a largely Black county, where again, people were standing in line to vote, and then the lines were so long because they had only provided that one location. And then they closed the doors when the deadline came, you know, where they said, okay, we're going to close the polls. Even if they do close the polls, you must stand in line, and you should still be able to cast your vote. And so I don't know what that is going to look like in Mecklenburg County, but that's why I'm encouraging everybody to vote early. Yeah,
vote early, order your ballot online, make sure that you have it properly signed and notarized, however, and you can either drop it off at an early voting location or at the Board of Elections directly, which would be the safest thing. If you have any questions or you have any concerns, may be the absolute safest thing. Okay, another question for you here is that, and Toya says, thank you. She had seen that on the news. All right, so it feels like young people are getting more involved. Is that what you're seeing? But there's also an apathy, like, because I also hear young people saying, this whole politics stuff, it doesn't really work. It's a fix. What are you seeing?
I think that young people are getting more involved. You have to remember that with young people, for a lot of them, this is their first opportunity to vote in a presidential election. So they're excited. And I might be, I'm pretty young myself, but my first time voting was actually in 2008. And I got to vote for, President Obama. That's who I wanted to be president. And I just thought that was just an awesome opportunity, as a young person back in '08. And so you have to remember that these young people, they are very much involved. I mean, think about the students involved with Parkland. Think about the students involved with climate change and the social justice movement. So high school age students that are getting ready to turn 18, they are very excited about voting. You do have to be 18 years old in order to vote, but you can get registered. You can get registered as a 17-year-old as long as your birthday is before election day, or maybe even on election day. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I do think young people are getting involved. Earlier this year, earlier in the election season, I was helping to highlight, different voter demographics in Charlotte. And I actually got to interview a 19-year-old, going to school at Hampton University, and she's home because we're all home due to COVID. And so she said, and so she said, look, I was planning to vote on campus, but now that I'm home, I'm really excited about, registering here at home and voting in person. This is going to be her first election. And so I do think that the young people are involved. And I see Toya's comment, you've got to let your voice be heard. We got to let our voices be heard. The other thing is I would just give a shout out to Generation Nation. They are an organization here in Mecklenburg County that helps to develop the voices of young people. And they're formerly known as Kids Voting.
Okay.
So I don't think we have that program anymore.
Okay.
Sorry, say that again?
I said they switched up. They've rebranded.
That's right. And so now they're called Generation Nation. And they're getting involved in more ways, in way more ways than voting. For example, they actually had somebody that they elected to the school board as a student representative, which is, a big deal because, I mean, when you think about, you have this school board that's been in operation for decades, but they've never had a student voice. And so it's important to have that student voice on the school board. And so that was something that they got done, I think it was a couple of years ago, and they've had at least 1 or 2 students to serve on the school board, I think 2 years at a time, high school students.
Yeah, I think that speaks to having a seat at the table, right?
Yeah.
Right, they are the students being heard. It's there to serve the students, but they need to have a seat at a table. So I've got a question for you. On your website, Amplify Charlotte, you talk about the importance on how you have sort of these touchy conversations with people. Like there's a lot of touchiness for good reason. There's a lot of sensitivity for good reason. What do you say to the apathetic voter who says, and I'm repeating something I heard, voting doesn't really work. It's old time. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't even believe in that stuff. Like, tell me your thoughts and how do you sort of engage that person? Or do you even engage that person? Do you just say, you know what, you're a lost cause. I'm going to go over here and spend my time with someone who's considering voting. What are your thoughts?
Right. Oh, that is really hard. It's been really hard because I try not to engage in like toxic conversations online, but if it's going to be a productive conversation, then I would definitely engage with that person and help to shed some light on why it's important to vote. I think especially sort of in the activist community, and in the social justice community, a lot of Black folk have felt that all of their efforts just have not really led to much change, and so we feel really like hopeless when it comes to voting. But at the same time, they say no demonstration without legislation.
Right.
So if you're marching in the streets and you don't have a plan, you don't have a thing that you're marching for, it's not going to lead to change. And that's the same thing with voting. Your demonstration is how you show up every day. Your demonstration is the fact that you're an American citizen, you know, and I know that the value of that might have shifted over the past 4 years, you know, the value of being an American citizen, but you still have that citizenship, right? It is your right to vote. So that's, yeah. And so no demonstration without legislation. And so your demonstration is how you show up every day. It's you're paying your taxes, you're sending your kids to school, you are driving on the road, you are eating the food. And so that's how you show up. And then your legislation is how you can change the people who represent you. You can change that. You have a part in that. I think especially because we live in North Carolina, we have an opportunity. We have a huge opportunity to change the outlook of our state.
Right.
And that is a big deal because we have a Democratic governor. However, our state house and I think our general assembly is led by the Republican Party, so we kind of split. And I'm not trying to get too political, but when it's like that, you actually have an opportunity to shift the scales a little bit when we all vote and when we all are engaged.
No, without question. And my final question to you is, we're going to all vote in November. I want everyone to vote in November. But now after the vote, right? After the vote, and say after your candidate did or didn't win, right? So let's talk to the person who I voted and my candidate didn't win. What's their responsibility? What should they be doing?
Oh, that's a really good question. After November, how do you stay engaged? After November, how do you keep it going, you know, and how can you continue to make change? So, I think it's working at the local level. It's getting involved with local boards and commissions. It's meeting people who might be running for office. It's meeting people who represent their HOA.
Right.
You know, it's not just about political office, but it's about parents who want to make a difference on their PTA. I'll give you an example that, you know, that just came to me recently. I got to know a town council person for the town of Harrisburg. And so Harrisburg is just right outside of Charlotte. It's like, I think it's
Cabarrus County.
Cabarrus County. So Harrisburg is in Cabarrus County, and it's north of Charlotte. And so I don't know if you're familiar with Councilwoman Diamond Clinton Williams, but she was the first Black woman town council member that was elected, and I think this was a couple years ago, so she's still in her first term. And so she is the only Black female on that whole board. And when you think about how urban and how diverse our communities are growing, it's important to have that representation. And so, you know, had I not heard about her and thinking about, oh, I want to see people who look like me. I want to see people who look like me in those positions. And you just start to pay attention to things like that. And also what you all are doing, you know, at Enlivian, in terms of getting people involved and getting residents involved. Follow these affordable housing conversations.
I mean, affordable housing is a huge conversation, and quite frankly, it gets bigger and bigger every single day, particularly with the economy and the unemployment rate. Could prepare for this. It's not as if someone said, hey, the economy is going to all but stop for 7 months and your paycheck is going to stop. So families are really being put in a difficult position. And yes, so absolutely, this is why we do this, because affordable housing is a major issue that everyone needs to be paying attention to. All right, so Amiko came in. Amiko has a question. Can a president hold up the voting if they are losing? So that is obviously of great discussion here in the coming days.
Right. So there are laws in place. Okay, there are laws in place, and our Constitution is it's still got some bones to it. There are laws in place that prevent that from happening. Elections must take place on the first Tuesday in November. And, just because the president is not seeing the outcome that he wants to see, there's not a way legally. There's no legal way that you can hold up the election. Because of mail-in voting, though, and because we know that there's going to be an incredible number of people voting, we do think that the votes are going to come in probably even up to a week. It could even be on November 10th that we know the actual outcome of the election. But I will say people are already voting.
Right, early voting. Absolutely. And so my last, and so I just want to say this in closing. First and foremost, someone said to me two things, and I think it just begs repeating, is that if your vote wasn't important, they wouldn't be trying so hard to suppress it. They wouldn't be trying so hard to stop you. And so when we're out here and we're hearing all this negative and all this vitriol that's going on about voting and this and this and this and this and this, yeah, it's all a tactic to turn you off on the voting process. So don't do it. The other thing is that voting is not a marriage, right? This is not your husband or your wife and your life for your life to be. This is more like, as someone put it to me, a bus route. You are getting on the bus that's going to get you to the closest place where you're trying to go, and then you're going to have to get out and walk the rest. That's what voting is, right? No, there is no perfect candidate, right? There is no one who's going to vote and feel the same way that you think about everything. And so, with that said, vote early, and get involved. Absolutely. So, Miss Christine Edwards, it has been a fantastic pleasure to have you on LIV TV. We have all of your social media up here. We have your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everything. Go up there. And if we can have her phone number up there. Your phone number is 704-900-3428. She's doing great things in the community. I encourage everyone to go to her website, www.amplifycharlotte.com. Christine, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you on the other side of the election. We'll probably have more to discuss then.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.